You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. And on today's episode, we're reviewing the second ODI between Australia and Pakistan, a comprehensive dominant victory, however you like to call it, for Pakistan to level the series and to take this ODI series against Australia to a deciding match, leveling the series at 1-1. It was a fantastic win, as I mentioned, a very comprehensive, dominant performance. It's their first ODI win in Australia since 2016-17, where they won at the MCG all those years ago. And they won by 6 wickets in that game many years ago. And then this win here in Adelaide, it's only their second win at the Adelaide Oval since 1996 in ODIs. And that was last century. And they won that game by 12 runs. So for Pakistan, thoroughly deserved victory. They had to wait for a long time for this victory at the Adelaide Oval, obviously against Australia in ODIs, not since 1996. But they outplayed Australia in all 3 departments, the bat, the ball, and in the field, and thoroughly deserve their victory, as we will discuss as this episode progresses. On the other hand, for Australia, a crushing defeat, you have to say. When you lose by 9 wickets, it's always a crushing defeat. And the batting cost Australia dearly in this game. The batting was no near to the standards that Australia set themselves with the bat. It was very poor, a very underwhelming performance, you have to say, from Australia. And obviously, plenty to ponder about going into the last game of the series, where all the test players will be rested. Josh Inglis will be a new captain, a new batting lineup, new bowling attack. It's going to be a challenge for Australia to try and win this series come the last game in Perth after this very disappointing loss to Pakistan here in Adelaide. So plenty to unpack, plenty to talk about from this second ODI between Australia and Pakistan from the Adelaide Oval. So let's get straight into it and discuss what went down in this second ODI between Australia and Pakistan. But first of all, let's recap and have a look at the match summary and how things panned out from the second ODI between Australia and Pakistan from the Adelaide Oval. Australia, well, they batted first and made 163 all out in 35 overs. It was a pretty underwhelming batting performance. Steve Smith top scored with 35. Haris Rauf took 5 wickets for Pakistan. Pakistan needed 164 runs to win. They chased it down with ease, finishing on 1 for 169. Siam Aroob top scored with 82. And Adam Zampa took the only wicket for Australia. He was the only wicket taker for the Australian bowlers. Pakistan won by 9 wickets, and Haris Rauf was named the player of the match for his 5-wicket haul, and thoroughly deserved as well. Now, what were the key moments and key factors that decided this game in the second ODI between Australia and Pakistan? Well, really, there were only really 2 key factors, really, that decided this game in Pakistan's favour. Haris Rauf's 5-wicket haul was key to enable Pakistan to bowl Australia out for 163, like he did in the last game in Melbourne, where he took those back-to-back wickets when he got rid of Labuschagne and Maxwell. That turned the game on its head. His 5-wicket haul in this second game of the series in Adelaide, pretty much the same thing happened, turned the game in Pakistan's favour. And the other key moment, I should say, was the opening partnership between Aroob and Shafiq of 137. That pretty much set the foundation for Pakistan to chase down 163 for victory. And that pretty much enabled Pakistan to not lose any early wickets, to put pressure on Australia and pretty much cruise to the victory in the end. So those were the key moments and key factors from the second ODI between Australia and Pakistan from the Adelaide Oval. Now, let's talk about how both Australia and Pakistan performed in this second ODI at the Adelaide Oval in terms of their performance. And we'll start with the home side, Australia, and talk about their batting and bowling performances. We'll start with the batters and talk about the batting performance from Australia in the second ODI against Pakistan. what can you say about the batting? It was pretty poor. Probably Australia's worst batting performance in one-day cricket for some time. The batting was underwhelming. The batting was poor on a very good Adelaide Oval pitch, which is a typical Adelaide Oval surface that's pretty good for batting. The Australian batters failed, and they failed big time. And as I said, it was pretty much a poor performance. When you get bowled out for 163 in 35 overs, that pretty much indicates that the batting performance was a pretty bad batting performance, and it was. Just like in Game 1 in Melbourne, another batting collapse, poor shot selection, lack of partnerships, no one in the top order made a big score of significant note. The only one who did was Steve Smith, and he top scored with 35. And pretty much it was a pretty poor batting display by Australia. And obviously the highest partnership for the innings was 38, and that was the third wicket between Smith and Inglis, and that was about it in terms of partnership. So, yeah, as anyone would say, pretty poor batting performance. And we saw Australia scrape over the line in the last game in Melbourne. This game here exposed some areas of concern with their batting, especially against express pace. They struggled again to harass Rauf, especially, some of the Australian batters who got out to harass Rauf struggled. And that pace that he brings brought about that struggle. Obviously, the 5 wickets that he took, Inglis, Labuschagne, Hardy, Maxwell, let's exclude Pat Cummins because he's a tail ender, but pretty much those other ones I mentioned did struggle against him. Well, Josh Inglis was a bit unlucky. He had a bit of an inside edge onto the glove, onto the fire guard, got caught behind. Labuschagne and Hardy got stuck in the crease, didn't really move and got nicked off. Glenn Maxwell played a pull shot, which he didn't control and chopped onto his stumps. But the Australian batters, just like in the first game, struggled to harass Rauf with that extra pace. And whoever bowls 150 kilometers per hour, or the equivalent in miles per hour, probably touching 90, batters are always going to find it difficult because you have less time to react and less time to line up the ball. So that's where Australia went wrong there in terms of their batting performance. As I mentioned, poor shot selection. There were some examples of poor shot selection throughout this innings, and I've listed a few to mention today. Steve Smith to Hassanein. That was a very poor shot, chasing a short and wide one well above his head, and he went fetching for it, got the outside edge, and straight into the hands of Rizwan. That was a pretty poor shot from Steve Smith. He looked good. If Australia were going to get a total that was going to be challenging, he had to bat through the innings. He was trying to do that. Now, before he got out, Steve Smith survived an LBW appeal, which was given not out on the field, but Pakistan reviewed it. Turned out it was umpire's call, and Steve Smith got away with that one. Not a surprise to see him miss balls targeting at his pads of late. And the next ball, he gets out and plays that rash shot. It wasn't the greatest delivery from Hassanein, but that's an example of a poor shot selection, poor decision from the Australian batters in terms of shot selection. The Glenn Maxwell one to Harris Rauf, a high bouncer well above his head. He went fetching for it with his hands to try and play a pull shot, and he didn't have control of it whatsoever. It looked pretty ugly. When you're playing the pull shot, it's important to have control. And you don't want to be chasing the ball well above your helmet, well above your head, I should say, and getting your hands, to the ball without any control. And Maxwell did that. And the only way you're going to get out is either top edge it and get caught, or get a bottom edge and play onto the stumps. And that's what happened with Glenn Maxwell. That was a poor shot. Matt Short hitting on the up, hit it straight to the fielder at cover when he got out to a Freedy. That was a pretty poor dismissal, really. He's either going to hit it along the ground or hit it over the top of the fielder at cover. So examples there of poor shot selections and decision-making from the Australian batters. And the Australian team talk about playing an aggressive brand of cricket, but not only Australia, but other teams that we've noticed around the world, and with the rise of T20 cricket, a lot of players, especially in ODIs and in test matches, don't have the ability to bat for long periods of time and build an innings and go through the gears. It all seems to be top gear or bust, which you can't do. That's not sustainable. And it's common sense. It's smart cricket. Look at Pakistan, as we'll talk about Pakistan in a moment, with their opening partnership of Aroub and Shafiq. What do they do well? They played good cricket shots. They soaked up the pressure, played good cricket shots, and took their time. And they were aggressive in the process. But they weren't reckless, unlike Australia with some of their dismissals and poor shot selections and all that stuff. So I think it's not only a problem that Australia has, as we saw in this game, it's a problem worldwide where you have teams, players lacking the ability to build innings and go through the gears and not be reckless. And you've got to get the balance right between being aggressive and playing smart cricket. And we didn't see that from Australia with the bat today. You've got some quality players who can bat better than they showed in this game, the likes of Maxwell, Labuschagne, Inglis, and Smith, for example. Obviously, Matt Short and Fraser McGurk can bat better. And obviously, both of them are trying to cement a spot as the second opener to Travis Head when he comes back. And obviously, they haven't had great results in the series. So for Australia, they've got a lot of work to do going into the last game in Perth, but obviously they won't have Steve Smith. They won't have Marnus Labuschagne in the batting because they're getting ready for the Test series against India. So Australia will have new batters to come in and a new batting order, and obviously Josh Inglis is captain. So Australia will have to pretty much reset pretty quickly because there's a tight turnaround between this game and the game in Perth. But yeah, with Australia's batting, very poor and very disappointed with the way that they're batted. It was pretty much horrible to watch, really, and frustrating as well. For any fan watching from home, if you support Australia, you'll be scratching your head and you'll be yelling at the TV and you'll be saying, oh, why are you doing that? It was very poor, really, very poor indeed. And just, lacking that cricketing smartness about it. It looked ugly. It looked, it looked really bad. And the batters struggled with the pace of Harris Rauf as well. Batters probably got a bit lazy with their footwork as well. And it just looked ugly, if I can say that. So nothing much to add on, really, with the Australian batting performance. It was not good enough. Simple as that. So they need to quickly regroup for the next game in terms of the batting. The bowling performance, we'll talk about that quickly, I should say. Nothing really to discuss about the bowling because defending 163 was always going to be tough. Needed to take early wickets and needed to bowl Pakistan out. That wasn't going to happen. And Pakistan, with the opening partnership of Aroub and obviously Shafiq, pretty much put Australia under pressure from the get-go and really bossed the run chase from then on in, really. So the bowling was pretty poor. Well, I say poor. Pretty much when you're defending 163, you're always going to be under pressure, and it's always going to be an impossible task to try and pull something off. Also, Australia, in terms of their fielding as well, their fielding wasn't great. Just like in Game 1 in Melbourne, Game 2 was the same. There was an overthrow that went for 5 runs, went to the boundary for 4, and the batters ran a single, so 5 runs off that overthrow, which was poor. Adam Zampa dropped Aroub on 47. That looked like a very ugly drop catch from him. So Australia not really their best in the field as well in Game 2 as it was in Game 1. So plenty of work to do for Australia going into the last game, obviously with their batting and with their fielding as well. They need to tighten up on that. But to finish up about Australia before we move on and talk about Pakistan and discuss about their performance in this game, Australia overall, very poor, not their best game, to be honest. Their batting was poor. Their fielding was poor as well. Their bowling, they bowled okay up front, but the pressure of not, making a significant score put them under pressure immensely. And whenever you get bowled out for 163, your bowlers are going to find it tough to try and claw your way back into the game and try and win. And that And that wasn't the case. So overall, pretty poor performance by Australia in this second ODI against Pakistan. Let's move on and talk about Pakistan's performance in game number 2 of this ODI series with both bat and ball. We'll start with the batters and talk about their performance in the second ODI. It was a very good batting display from Pakistan. It was very comprehensive, very dominant, and it was a pretty good partnership. And it was, really. They did pretty well, and they performed very well with the bat, Pakistan. A very much better improved batting performance compared to the first game in Melbourne, where they were lacking intent and losing wickets and not building partnerships at regular intervals. This second game here in Adelaide, it was pretty good in terms of their batting performance. They showed a lot more intent. They didn't lose wickets in clumps. They built partnerships. And we saw that with the opening partnership between Arub and Shafiq. 137 for the first wicket, pretty much set up the run chase for Pakistan. They absorbed the pressure between themselves, and obviously the Australian bowlers were bowling pretty well up front. Both Arub and Shafiq took a bit of time, because obviously chasing 163 in 50 overs, you have all the time in the world. They took that time. Once they got in, once they got set, they were able to capitalize and really put the Australian bowlers to the sword and put them under pressure, which they did. Very impressed with how both of them went about things. And also they showed the Australian batting group how to bat, because, this wicket was a typical Adelaide Oval surface. It was flat, ball not doing much. The ball did a little bit off the pitch, a little bit with the seam and a little bit of swing, but not that much. It wasn't unplayable by any means. It was a good typical Adelaide Oval surface. And both Arub and Shafiq showed that. They also showed Australia that you can be aggressive, but you can play good cricket shots and be aggressive at the same time. And that's what both Arub and Shafiq did in their innings. And obviously Babar Azam when he came in towards the end as well. But, the big talking point from the batting was Sahem Arub. 82 of 71. I can see why people have big raps on him in terms of a potential prospect for Pakistan going into the future. He can bat. He can also bowl as well, and bowl a bit of spin as well. And we saw that from him. He can also bowl some spin as well, and that was pretty good to see him do that and really perform well and take his opportunities with both bat and ball in this game, and that's what he did, Arub. And also Shafiq as well, very quality, quality player, Shafiq. He's made a good start in his test career, and obviously in ODI cricket as well. He had a pretty good 50-over World Cup last year as well, from memory. And he showed his potential in this game as well. And then Babar Azam came in and just put the icing on the cake, really, with a 15 not out of 20 to really pretty much cement Pakistan's victory in this match. It was comprehensive, and it was, very good one-day cricket batting, really. So to finish up about Pakistan and their batting, pretty good, pretty dominant, and really showed the Australian batters how to bat on this Adelaide Oval surface, really. Now, the bowling, let's talk about the bowling performance for Pakistan in this second ODI. They bowled pretty well, it had to be said. Pretty much, bowling Australia out for 163 was a good effort. That's a good performance with the ball. Shaheen Shah Afridi took early wickets, 3 for 26 for him. Naseem Shah and Hassanain chipped in with some wickets. But the main star of the bowling was Haris Rauf. Yet again, 5 for 29 in 8 overs. His spell pretty much turned the game in Pakistan's favour. He got 5 wickets. He got rid of Inglis, Labuschagne, Hardy, Maxwell and Cummins, which was a pretty good display from Haris Rauf. Anyone who can bowl 150 kilometers per hour, or the equivalent in miles per hour, around about nearly touching 90, is a great asset to have in your bowling attack, because batters find it difficult to face bowlers who bowl at that pace and the Australian batters in this series have certainly struggled against Haris Rauf, and that has shown in the 2 games thus far. So, he pretty much led the way with the ball. Pakistan bowled really well. They kept the pressure on Australia throughout the whole innings. They took wickets when they needed to at regular intervals. Mohammad Rizwan was pretty good in his field placements, and he had a pretty good game, 6 catches, nearly took 7, but he dropped that catch off Adam Zampa. There were a couple of bits of misfields and drop catches from Pakistan, but overall they were pretty good. 2 drop catches. Rizwan dropped Zampa. Freedy dropped Smith early on in his innings, but that didn't really matter really in the context of the game. So Pakistan were pretty good, really, and it was a good bowling performance. So they'll definitely take a lot of confidence as a bowling group going into the next game in Perth, and hopefully they can continue on the momentum that they have already established. So, yeah, pretty dominant bowling display from Pakistan after Rizwan won the toss and said, we'll have a bowl first, and, it paid off. To finish up about Pakistan overall, in terms of a team performance, pretty dominant. I think they'll be very happy with how they went, and I think with both bat and ball, they'll be very satisfied with their performance, certainly better than it was in Melbourne, and obviously great confidence going into the last game in Perth. Obviously, we've had a real opportunity to try and win the series, which is a fantastic position to be in. So a very dominant display from Pakistan in the second ODI against Australia. Some final thoughts to end on in this review of this second ODI between Australia and Pakistan on today's episode of the podcast. Some of the thoughts that I would take away from this game. A dominant display, really, from Pakistan. Outplayed Australia. They pushed them to the limits, completely outplayed them in all 3 departments. Haris Rauf's 5 wickets was impressive. The opening partnership was good between Arub and Shafiq, contributed to the victory for Pakistan. And Pakistan have leveled the series at 1-1 and are a real chance to win the series in the last game in Perth. Obviously, Australia resting the test players. There's no Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood. There's no Labuschagne. There's no Smith. Josh Inglis is a new captain. So they've got a real opportunity to try and win the series. But I think for Pakistan, the next game in Perth, going to be a challenge in those conditions with the extra bounce and pace. And we saw what happened in the test match last summer when they played that test match last year against Australia. Their batters struggled on a pretty difficult surface in Perth. It may be the same again in the one-dayer come the 3rd game. So that's something that the Pakistan batters will have to try and contend with, is that extra bounce and pace. But the bowling attack will definitely love bowling on that surface in Perth, especially Haris Rauf. He can get a few wickets as he's shown across the 2 games, and it will be a handful. So Pakistan, a real opportunity to win the series. On the other hand, for Australia, a disappointing display, really not at their best in this game, below their best. It was certainly below par. The batting was poor, really set the tone really for the match. And that certainly let them down. A challenge to win the series now for Australia, because as I mentioned earlier, the test players will be rested. Josh Inglis will be a new captain. There'll be a new batting lineup because batters will have to come in, different bowling attack as well. And Pakistan have got momentum after winning this game quite comprehensively. So challenges for the new captain and Josh Inglis going into the last game of the series. But Australia will have to lick their wounds. They'll have to move on pretty quickly and try and turn things around to try and win the series if they can. And let's hope, from an Australian point of view, that they can do that. Another good crowd, 21,398 people, backing up the 20-odd thousand from the MCG. So we've had 2 good crowds for the first 2 games of the series. Let's hope we get another good crowd in Perth for the deciding match of the series, because it's going to be an exciting conclusion to this ODI series between Australia and Pakistan. With the series locked at 1-1, it's sure to be an exciting last game in Perth for the decider. Let's hope that is the case. Thanks everyone for listening to our second ODI review between Australia and Pakistan. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on this second ODI between Australia and Pakistan in the comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching and listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.